Hello and welcome to another episode of Agri Art. During the Age of Enlightenment, different English colonies, especially through the East India Trade Company, would create new spaces for intellectual explorations in various parts of India. The increased colonization of India, plus the transition from pre-Enlightenment eras to the Enlightenment, converted the general fascination with exotic species of plant into a full-on major scientific project of empirical knowledge acquisition. It is during this time that botanical art would become a major science in and of itself, and within the framework of India, a hybrid art between traditional Indian art and the scientific art of Enlightenment Europe would become fused to create Patnakalam. The paper I'm referencing goes over the history and intellectual genealogy of this art style. Let's get started. During the 1700s, the sciences in Europe have developed in quite a profound way. Although the full maturity of what would become science in Europe did not fully develop until the 1800s, the seeds of what we call modern science began emerging during this time period, with fields of natural history being the intellectual ancestor of modern botany, zoology, meteorology, and geology. One of the key founders of this movement was Thomas L. Hankins, who relied on careful observation of natural phenomena rather than the Cartesian model of deductive reasoning on abstract principles. At this point, science was not fully secularized yet, and much of the discussion still talked about the divine essence and the divine plans within each system. And there's a great many debates on the essence of plans within God's design. Carl Linnaeus was one of the most important contributors to the debates between the different scientists at that time, having developed the binomial nomenclature system that became the basis for taxonomy to this day. He also created his magnum opus, Species Plantarum, in 1753, the starting point of modern taxonomy. He classified plants based on sexual characteristics of different plant species. The system became almost universal during his lifetime. He later died in 1778. 10 years afterwards, the Linnaean Society of London was founded after his natural history collection. Much of Carl Linnaeus' work was built off of other botanists during that time period and prior to that time period. These include John Ray, Joseph Pitton Turnfort, and Herman Boerhaave. It was in 1760 when the British taxonomy system fully adopted Carl Linnaeus as the chief means of taxonomy. It is from there that it became expanded all across Europe and parts of Asia, and through those countries, the rest of the world. And it was adopted because it worked out really quite well. Which brings us to the botanical artwork. The very photorealistic way of drawing plants using live specimens began in the early Renaissance era, which includes Botticelli and Da Vinci, although it still held religious significance. It was after it was moved into the utilitarian world of medicine that a description of flowers were used as visual guides to assess identification of different plants and herbs. These were herbals. One such instance would be the Herbarium Vivae Eaconiae, published in 1530 by Otto Bunfels. This manuscript is notable for the modern realism and scientific accuracy of each individual plant. Although even during his time, there are still some individuals that buck the trend. Mr. Fu, in his work The Historia Striparium, was far more stylized than the other herbals during that time period. It was because of this that it became more popular in certain circles. Stemming from these herbals was a new type of book called a Florigeum. These were botanical and scientific illustrations of different ornamental plants, specifically flowers. The primordial garden catalog was a subgroup of the Florigeum. The garden catalog became a major player within various parts of Europe, such as the Netherlands, France, and Germany. This, combined with various flower illustrations and new geographical exploration, led to the coming of the Dutch Golden Age. The Dutch Empire would establish bases throughout the Old World and parts of the New World, and various scientists and artists would come to these places to document the various species and natural history of different regions through both writing and watercolors. One such work would build off the different herbals and Florigia of the past. The book Hortus Malabarcensis, a 12-volume survey of the flora in the Dutch-controlled Malabar region of India, made by Hendrik van Reed, which would become a major influence on Carl Linnaeus. And he would also codify this type of art style into his taxonomic system, and so the botanical art derived from Dr. Reed would become codified into taxonomy. This would be done by Georg Dionysius Ehrhardt, the apprentice of Carl Linnaeus. So the modern form of botanical art draws both from long cultural history of botanical art within Europe throughout the continent, plus Linnaean taxonomy. Hello, I just want to let you know, if you want to fund this channel, you can do so on the platforms seen in the description below. In terms of botanical art in India, most botanical artists were trained in the Mughal tradition, an art style that emerged in the early 16th century and lasted until the mid-18th century. It was a Muslim dynasty of Turkish and Mongol origin that ruled northern India until the mid-19th century. Within this dynasty, flowers held a special place of aesthetic sensibility, and floral motifs were ubiquitous not only in paintings but in textiles, carpets, and carvings, as well as metalwork and masonry. It was between the years 1569 and 1627 that this passion for flowers reached its apex. The decline during the 18th century led to a movement of these artists to different locations for new patronage. This art style is often drawn from both Indian and Persian tradition. One of the key players within this art scene was a fellow by the name of Shah Jahan. I hope I'm not mispronouncing it. He patronized numerous artists and commissioned many manuscripts and portrait albums as per tradition in illustrated history. Several of his works were originals, while others were leftover unfinished manuscripts and paintings started by his father, and several of the works he commissioned were influenced partially by European herbal documents. This would be the first proto-Patnakalam style art. Patnakalam became a major player, however, during the decline of the Mughal Empire. As artists went their separate ways from the following dynasty, they found employment in other groups, mostly consisting of English civil servants. Most of these artists migrated to the Indian region of Patna. This occurred mostly in the 1750s. These art pieces were combinations of both European and Mughal styles. The first known patron of this type of art was Lady Mary Impey, the wife of Lord Elijah Impey. Lord Impey was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at Fort William, which was set up in 1774. The Impeys maintained a private garden in Calcutta to house flora and fauna native to this region. They employed various artists to depict their collection. The project, beginning in 1777, resulted in paintings of over 300 birds, animals, insects, and plants. Another major employer was James Kerr, who employed several artists for documentary purposes. James Kerr was a Scottish surgeon, and the botanical descriptions were meant for both commercial and medicinal use. These art pieces had the same style as Mughal florals, both greater photorealism, and the reproductive parts of the plant are depicted separately in line with European illustration practice. Another figure who hired artists for a similar purpose was Richard Perry. He hired several Patna artists to depict the plants and animals of Sumatra. These European patrons, such as Kerr and Perry, allowed for the artistic style of the Mughals to remain mostly unencumbered, but they had to be photorealistic to a very high degree, so that the plants could be portrayed scientifically accurate. A pupil of Carl Linnaeus, Gerhard Koenig, would later be employed by the East India Company, would be the first to apply Linnaean classification to Indian plants. The tradition would continue under William Roxburgh. Roxburgh would employ local artists to produce illustrations of these plants, alongside the depictions in writing. Unlike most pieces of botanical art, throughout history. All these Patnakalam paintings were adorned with the name of each artist. As a result, we know the names of the artists who did much of the work. Afterwards, several offshoots of the style would appear to create purely aesthetic forms of art, combining Enlightenment values and scientific accuracy with Mughal aesthetics. This style had steady demand all throughout the 19th century, both for aesthetic purposes and documentarian purposes. And that about covers everything. Thank you for watching.